father introduced me to chainsaws when I was about this big. He had his own timber business. He did the clearing of the M1 motorway. And he was born in Newfoundland in Canada. And he used to work in the lumber woods until he was about 16. Then he came over to this country to fight in the war, survived the war, stayed on, built up his timber business. And in that era, they used to blow out the tree roots with explosives. So we used to have our own explosives bunker in the garden. We used to have sticks of gelignite, detonators, totally different era. And so chainsaws were always about the house, usually in pieces on the kitchen table. In that period, there were no chain brakes on the chainsaws, so they were a lot more scary than they are now. And so for me, using a chainsaw is just like using a pair of garden shears, really. You know, it's not a scary thing. And when nobody's watching, I do occasionally get the 880 out with a 4-foot bar, but I'm not supposed to, really. I get told off when I do. The carver using the trog hurler is Dave Lucas. Because chainsaws vent and exhaust at the front, when you create a cavity like that, if you don't wear breathing equipment, you're basically passing out. So Dave used the trog hurler to hollow out the cavity wearing breathing equipment. Since Friday morning, he's created all the rest. It was really about 4 years ago that we became aware that you could buy special bars and chains to go on to the conventional power heads. And it's those carving bars and chains that make it possible to get the detail without it being dangerous, without getting kickback and things like that. For a large piece like this, we generally agree the design ahead of starting the work, create a drawing, and on the sign here you can see the drawing that Dave created, and then he will produce that sculpture. And usually it comes out looking pretty much like it should.
You have to do your cross-cut maintenance chainsaw course to get your certificate to basically, competently use a chainsaw. But apart from that, there aren't specific courses for chainsaw carving. So, I mean, I remember coming to Westonbirt in particular years ago before I did it, and watching people here, and that's where I got an interest, and we started a business. And then you have to use the special equipment for chainsaw carving, which is carving bars rather than the standard bars. But it's a case of really practicing. Making lots of mistakes to start with, and getting better, and just using the saw, but as a different tool, as a carving tool, as opposed to a kind of a felling tool. The challenges are not taking a big bit off by mistake, so you've got to kind of pre-plan what you want to do. But pieces like this, it's lovely because the fairy tale stories mean there's lots of characters, there's lots of exciting things you can put in there, and there's no rules really because it's a fairy tale. So, I mean, mine, for example, the boat with the water is kind of on top and then the trees underneath it, but in my fairy tale land, that's because the world's slightly upside down. So, with a piece like this, I kind of call it relief carving. So instead of carving a bit with lots of space around it, I've got things tucked in. And that makes it really tricky because it's limiting the angles you can get your saw into. So instead of somewhere where you could walk around and get a clean cut, you end up poking in with the bar and scraping little bits and pieces off. So that can be kind of frustrating, but you've just got to take your time with it. And I've got a pig around the other side, which I've been working on all this morning, which was a perfect example of that, because behind him is solid wood, and I can't get to where I traditionally would if it was a freestanding pig. So, so things like that can be a bit of a challenge.
And this is Grommet. It's going to be part of the Grommet Unleashed trail that's in Bristol, so it ties in with that. And the fact there's a Grommet here at the gate at Westonbirt. So he's going to be hopefully exhibited in Bristol alongside the others and then auctioned off at the end for charity. This is oak, but the beauty of it is that you can carve it in any wood. I mean, the main thing to consider is the durability of the piece afterwards. So naturally durable timbers like oak or chestnut or whatever are preferable, but you can carve in ash or anything you get hands on, really. I've just got into it myself, and I've been speaking to the other guys who've been doing it for, 10 years, 15 years, and they say that so many more people are coming into it and there's such a growing market that it's really taking off, I suppose. Well, you have to make sure that you've got your chainsaw tickets. That would be the thing that I would really emphasise, because they can be dangerous, and when you're carving, you're using them in some quite unorthodox ways that, if you're not used to the tool, could potentially be lethal, I suppose. I am self-taught. I didn't go on a course to learn carving, although I did forestry beforehand, where I learned to use the kit. So that familiarity helped me to sort of use the tools with the timber. I'm wearing steel toe cap chainsaw boots, so they've got steel in the toes and then Kevlar. They come up to about here to protect the lower part of your leg. And then the trousers, again, are Kevlar layers, so they don't sort of prevent it the saw cutting into the trousers. What they do is clog up the mechanism. So they've got all these really long fibres, and if the saw touches it, they all got ripped out and they clog up the sprocket and prevent it turning. First aid kit on my back, so I've got trauma bandages and Celox in there. And then I wear a dust mask when I'm carving, because there's lots of particulates in the air, and the fumes from the saws and everything can be a bit hostile and not so good for the lungs. Safety specs, save your eyeballs, and ear defenders. I mean, occasionally I see people using chainsaws without ear defenders, and having done it once, I will never do it again, because you leave with your ears ringing, and doing that on a regular basis will just destroy your hearing. So it's all important stuff.
Your soul